Welcome to A Day for Adventure, the premier outdoor podcast that will get you off your butt and outside. I'm Will.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Trevor.
And for this episode, we'll be talking about how to find people to go adventuring with. Now, I understand that there may be some of you who are thinking, screw people, why not just go on my own? And while I will say that a solo adventure can be a fantastic time to get acquainted with the outdoors, bringing people can raise the enjoyment exponentially. This is because, first and foremost, it's safer. As you go out on your adventures, there's always an inherent risk that you will get hurt on your journey. And if you bring your friends, you will end up having other people to help you if you get injured. When you're going alone, you're basically gambling that you will not get injured, and if you do get injured, you can take care of yourself for the whole way. Secondly, the challenges from adventuring can really build friendships and can help you bring together a sense of shared knowledge and can even divvy up the work. Some of those more obnoxious camp tasks become a lot easier when you have a pal to bring along.
Yeah, so the next step would just kind of be finding people. Unless you're lucky enough to have a bunch of people you met through scouting in a podcast and just go, hey, we're going outside. Except, Will, you'd have to drive, 12 hours to get here?
Yeah, 12 hours.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. Anyway, so going back to finding people, the first one that comes right off the bat is how the three of us found each other is just through scouting. It's an outdoor organization where you have to be in a group of people. I don't think you can have a troop with only one person. I don't think you can even have a troop of three people.
No,
Anyway, honestly, I think that's one of the easiest ways, but it's a time commitment. It's not just like hey, I want to go camping this weekend. I'm going to join scouts for the weekend. Other things you can do are school clubs. They tend to be less of a time commitment. I'm part of the Outdoor Adventure Club at my school out in Platteville, and I mean, it's kind of, we're going to go on a trip this weekend. If you want to come along, you pay the fee for gas or food or whatever we need, and you head out with us. If you don't, you stay in your dorm room and, I don't know, do homework. So if you're in a university or high schools, probably some of them might have outdoors clubs. Lastly, you could do online meetups. There are definitely Facebook groups, I know, for outdoor activities, especially if you're in a bigger city where there's a lot more people that share interests with you.
You could also look at the outdoor outfitters, sometimes put together treks that you may not have to plan fully and will be in a group setting. However, these are much more expensive since it takes all the planning and that type of work out of the equation.
Mm-hmm. And those groups also tend to provide gear depending on the level of the adventure. If it is like a simple weekend one, they might do the entire planning, the entire gear, and you just show up and go with your trek guide or whatever they like to call them and go on your, I don't know what an outfitter trip would be. The only ones I know off the top of my head are some of the like cross-country week-long ones, or not cross-country, but leaving the country ones. But those get really expensive.
One of the common ones that I can recall off the top of my head is, for example, in the Boundary Waters, those kind of trips you usually will go through an outfitter because most people don't have the equipment to really go canoeing in the Boundary Waters themselves. So a lot of those outfitters will gear you up with everything you need, all the food you need. All you have to do is just pay for the trip itself and the amount of time that you're going to be out. So there's also like things like hunting outfitters as well that do almost identical things. When you're going with outfitters, you might go with like something like REI or something, but more than likely you're going to see for every REI trip, there's probably about 5 or 6 more hunting style trips. I know people who've done those. I know people who've done the canoeing in the back countries. Those are very popular. If you go to like national parks and stuff, you will have an easier time of finding more local outfitters that will be able to get you set up and ready to go for your trip. So don't discount outfitters, but they can be quite a bit more expensive.
Yeah, and moving on, if you don't want to meet random people, that's a fine thing. You can always convince your friends to go along if they're willing to. I'd always start out small when bringing your friends. Best example is me and some of my friends from a mix of scouting and high school always said we were going to go camping. It was like a 10, 15 person group. Will, you might have been part of this group. We always said we were going to do it. We even started making plans, but we just never followed through because we couldn't find the time that all of us were available. So that goes actually for any trip, just keeping it small, especially if you're the one planning it. I'd say probably like six people is a good size. What do you think?
4, if you're going out far and doing more of an intense type of adventure, should be the minimum, just because if you get injured.
Yeah, I'm thinking a weekend, like
For
kind of drive up
weekends-
to a camping area.
Weekend, I mean, with that type of stuff, you could go as low from 2 to 6.
Yeah, I'd say about 6 is about the max that you'd want to go for a weekend trip. Just because once you start getting over 6, you're going to start dealing with so many people's schedules and so many people's other things they have to handle them over the weekend, like work and other stuff, that it sometimes it's just going to be more efficient to go with a smaller group. In those cases, you might even be better off going in a group of 4 and then a group of 4 the next weekend with other people at that rate, if you really want to bring people along for just a trip. But
Yeah. Another thing is picking who to bring. It would definitely be a good idea to pick people that you get along with, because especially your first trip can be stressful sometimes. Depending on the size of the tent, you might all be in one tent together, or if it's a group of 4, 2 people in one tent and 2 people in another tent. So you're going to be in close proximities with each other the entire weekend or week or however long trip you're doing. So pick people that you get along with. That's the best advice I can give you, especially friends. Don't lose a friendship over a dumb camping trip.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's good to try to gauge if your friend group would like outdoor activities. If they are more of an indoors person, they may not transition well into the kind of unexpected adventures that comes with outdoor camping, as essentially a lot of times you're riding by the seat of your pants. So if they're kind of uptight and need to plan things out, a self-planned weekend camping trip may not be the best decision.
Or you can just make them plan the entire thing if they like to plan.
But then if it goes wrong, it's going to cause
Them
more
to
issues.
freak out.
Yeah, if you have someone like that, maybe a more outfitter or a smaller activity would be a better idea. That's already planned and run by someone else.
Yeah, someone who has more control of the environment.
Yeah.
In.
I mean, there's a whitewater center near us that does almost like training courses that you can go on that can be just like half an hour of rafting on this artificial river that is pretty easy. You have your own guide and it's not too expensive for the day.
Yeah, I would just say that when it comes down to planning with friends and all of that, plan around their needs. So if they're the kind of person that doesn't really like to be outside all that much, plan around that. Don't just kind of make your own plan and then have them walk in and go, I wasn't expecting this. Right? You just cater to them. Don't cater to yourself, cater to them, because you're the one that's bringing them along with you. So you want to give them a good time so that they'll come with you again and again, and then you've got a permanent outdoor adventure friend. So that's something to keep in mind. I guess leading off of that, let's talk about the other elephant in the room when it comes to bringing people, which is bringing your family. So bringing your family and things like family hikes, family campouts, they are a great way of bonding with the family. They offer a lot of really interesting experiences, like some good stories. Best part usually is you don't have to kind of get to know everybody. You don't have to assume, because you already know exactly everything about them most of the time, unless you are like 10 years apart. So that kind of makes the planning process easier. If you've got a brother like I do, who is your twin brother, you're pretty much already forced to be glued to each other so you can probably plan something between the two of you out. without any real hitches. Family stuff does make the process of planning sometimes actually quite a bit easier. And the other thing about that is that, you know, your family might have some experiences that you lack. Remember, with age comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes some good ideas. So you might be able to, from them, they might be able to recommend cool trips, cool places that maybe you've never heard of. They may be able to finance it a little better if you are maybe conning your parents into getting a trip for all of you.
I've never done that before.
No, I haven't either. I haven't done that. That's a lie. Anyway, and I think the most helpful thing sometimes actually is just loaning gear. If you're going out on a camping trip, your family might already have some of the gear you need, so you might as well just borrow the gear from them. Or if you're going on a family trip, you might be able to just get them to bring it along with you. Now, that all being said, I highly recommend that before going on a camping trip, you make sure you are in good standing with your family members. I mean, that just seems like an obvious thing, but at the same time, I've met people who have tried to do things with their family, and they will never go on an adventure or any camping trip or anything because when they went on it with their family, they had a terrible time because they were not in very good standings. So it's a very important idea to just remember to keep yourself in a relatively good standing with your family when you're starting off. Do you have to bring your parents? No, it could just be your brother or your sister, or it could be your cousin even. Your cousins don't just because they don't live with you doesn't mean that they're not a good choice to bring along. Again, though, I think it's important to note, though, that, again, just like I said a little earlier, plan around them. So, for example, if you want to bring your dad, who is 60 years old and has joint problems, you might want to tone back the trip a little bit, reduce the weight on their backs so that they are not stressing out as much. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're working with your brother, who is 120 pounds and can carry more weight than you can, you might choose a completely different trip. So that's something to keep in mind, is just make sure that you, again, plan the trip around the people you're going with. Don't plan it around yourself, okay? Because you want to make a good impression with the people that you're going on trips with, because it'll just make your life so much easier.
The third group, which could arguably be the most dangerous, is
yes,
bringing your significant other. This could be anything from as simple as
Wait a
your
second, Will. I thought we were supposed to be talking about stuff we had experience with.
I have had experience with this one, though.
I know, that's why you got to sign the topic. I just had to.
Yep. So as I was saying, bringing in a significant other can be a challenge if your partner does not have as much experience camping. Like going with your friends, you will want to start small. Everything from a simple hiking trip with maybe going to dinner afterwards can turn into a nice date. Once you start expanding and going further, you may want to make sure that they're both physically, but also have the gear prepared, or else you're going to be having to stitch together some workarounds. I remember one time my girlfriend didn't have a sleeping bag, so we had to makeshift my sleeping bag.
You can share my sleeping bag.
We used the sleeping bag and some blankets to try to warm ourselves up. Granted, it was Wisconsin in October, so that didn't work as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it became memorable.
I bet.
Not like
you
that.
two are still dating. I don't know how.
That was because the next day was much better in comparison, where we were able to enjoy the outdoors and spend time with each other. The best part with these outdoor adventures is that it takes away a lot of the noise and you can focus on just kind of interacting with each other. Also, if you add in some good food before and after, you can really sweeten the deal.
Food.
Yes.
Pizza.
Actually, we had a 2 large gluten-free pizzas at this pizza place in Madison that we found on our way. It was fantastic.
Nice.
Are both of you guys gluten free?
Yeah.
Oh, you okay? Well, that actually makes
Well,
all
remember,
the
Will's allergic to literally everything except Lara bars.
You're right.
This is completely off topic, but
Sorry.
if you guys didn't know, one, I hate Lara bars. I learned that at Philmont because they only gave us the peanut butter and jelly ones. And Will always, I literally mean always, at least in high school, had Lara bars on him. So,
Yeah.
and he's
have
allergic
celiac.
to a lot of stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
just gluten.
That's what I that's what I remembered. It was just gluten for. I think it's just gluten now, right?
Yeah, I used
I
to
thought it
be.
was
I used to have issues with dairy products, but
Oh,
now
okay.
it's just celiac disease. Everything else is kind of chilled. But yeah, I've relied on Lara bars a lot over the years because they're one of the type of trail bars that are gluten free.
In my opinion, I like Lar bars. I'm not gonna lie, they're pretty good.
I think it's just the peanut butter and jelly ones that ruined it for me.
Oh, because those are made. Remember, those are made out of dates.
Yeah,
Dates are good on their own, so honestly, I think I might like Lara bars if I'm not forced to eat one of them for like 2 weeks.
yeah.
I stole most of my cruise Lar bars from them. It was worth it.
Should we bring this back on topic now?
We probably should. Should. So, of course, just like when we are, of course, whenever you're planning something out like this, you're going to run into general pitfalls when you're starting out. You're going to have some problems with over planning and or under planning. You and your crew may have different expectations for what you guys want to do. A lack of preparation can easily become a big problem. So let me go a little bit in depth. I'll try not to go too in depth about like big common issues. So over and under planning. So over planning is basically the idea that you are so prepared, if you will, for the trip that you actually do not have any form of leeway, if you will. So, for example, if you decided to plan things out so that you were leaving at 6 o'clock and you had everything so overly planned out that if one thing didn't happen directly on time, everything else is thrown off. So that's one aspect of over planning. Another aspect of over planning is bringing too much stuff. That's a very common problem that I definitely experienced when I was a lot younger. I would always bring way too much stuff, and I never would learn from that either. It was just something I kept doing for a long time. So really, you want to try and avoid over planning. It's better to over plan than to under plan, but that being said, try and limit your over planning. You always want to create a lot of wiggle room. If you create a lot of wiggle room, if something doesn't happen directly on time or specifically the way you want it to, which I guarantee you, it will not go the way you want it to your first couple times, you will have a little bit more room to be able to move things around and come up with a secondary plan right on the spot. Now, as for under planning is a very common problem amongst people who just kind of start out. Again, going back to catering your trip to your family, to your friends, to your significant other, I can guarantee you under planning is the culprit of basically catering a trip to yourself and not to them is a form of under planning. Under planning isn't really the idea that, oh, I didn't bring enough stuff, or, oh, I didn't bring enough, I didn't plan my time out very well. Under planning tends to really be more focused, especially in the more group setting. it tends to be a lot more on the, oh, I thought we could easily do an 11-mile hike when it was 90 degrees outside and we only had one water bottle between the two of us and we were walking on flat prairie land the whole time. Yes, this is a true story, by the way.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Good friend of mine, William was there actually this time around. Me, Parker, William, and our friend Graham decided to go out to South Kettle Moraine for a day. We were probably 13, 14, so we brought our parents along. And I remember that trip, we underplanned the trip because what ended up happening was we didn't think to bring enough water, so we had to walk 7 miles without enough water to get us through the trip. So we were out of water by the 3rd mile, so we had to walk 4 miles, which took us 2 hours, while one of our group mates was suffering from heat exhaustion, essentially. And we were trying
to... that bad. It wasn't heat exhaustion, but he was dehydrated.
He was dehydrated. He was clearly dehydrated. I remember that.
No,
but that's
it would have been medical attention if it was at that level of heat exhaustion.
Yeah, no, heat exhaustion can get bad, like really bad. Speaking from experience,
it can get bad, and it can get bad quick. That's from my own.
If you're
personal...
still hiking while heat exhaustion, then, if you're still able to hike for 2 hours, he said it's probably not heat exhaustion, but dehydration does lead to it. So get water.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So it's something to kind of keep in mind. You need to remember to plan the trip around the people that you're going with. If you don't plan it out and you think to yourself, oh, you can do that, I can do that, no problem, and don't consider the other people in your group, you might have some serious issues in the planning stages. That being said, before a trip, always make sure that you and the other people in your group all kind of get your expectations on the same page, okay? Don't try and not communicate with each other saying, this is what I want to get out of the trip. Okay, so like, for example, don't be that guy who's like, hey, I think we can get another 4 miles in, guys, when everybody else in the group is like already like about ready to pass out. Okay, that's not smart. That's differing expectations. Get the expectations well accommodated for your group. Honestly, like that's a very common thing that when you're starting out, you're going to run into that. Again, it kind of comes down to communication and just catering things to the people you're going with.
Differing expectations is very common if you have two people of different skill levels. I know that was something I was struggling with when I did take my girlfriend out for a longer camping trip, was that at that point, I was finished working at a camp where I was hiking 60 miles a week. So I was in shape and could blow through this stuff no problem. So I started out with a faster pace than what was really a good idea, which caused a little bit of trouble in the early stages of our trip. But then we were able to scale it back and work better. But just being aware that your abilities are likely not the same as someone else's will help you be able to accommodate them better.
Yeah, that's that is, I think, kind of the big gist I'm trying to get at, but just not saying the proper gist. So I think that's a very good point that William makes there. Make sure that when you are planning your trip, just try and make it so that you understand both people's skill levels and don't push things more than they have to. That's kind of the two really big pitfalls. The one thing I will make a comment about is preparation. So if you're going on a bigger trip, or even if you're going on a smaller trip, prepping, there's two ways of prepping. There is the physically prepping, which means preparing for the trip by planning it out, by physically practicing for a trip or staying in shape or whatever. And then there's mentally preparing, which is basically getting the plan, or like the actual expectation, being prepared to do this thing and do that mentally, right? Because mental resolve is very important especially when you're going out with friends. You want to keep yourself in a Zen mode or Zen kind of feeling, right? if you're underprepared in either one of them, it can completely destroy your trip. And a lot of the time, it's usually the second, which is the mental preparedness, that is always where people fall. Because, it's very easy to let your mindset slip. It's very easy to let your calm slip when one thing goes wrong. Okay, you got to be able to learn, and especially when you're in a group with a couple of people for the first time, you really want to make sure that you keep it calm. Don't snap at people when they are when they're getting a little mad at you or whatever. Okay, preparation, be prepared to just deal with other people. I think that's just kind of the gist of the whole entire idea of preparation. So I think that's really all I got on just general pitfalls that people go through.
Yeah, one I want to throw in there is also to remember we talk a lot about planning for the trip, and we talk a lot about the actual, say, hiking portion of it. But if it's a weekend, and especially if it's a week-long trip, you have to also worry about the in-campsite stuff too. So, like, whose jobs are what, whether it be cooking, cleaning, setting stuff up, water, fire, that kind of things. And especially going into the food, planning on who's going to bring food, whether everyone just brings their own individual meals and they have to prepare their own food, which I've done trips like that. And other trips where the most common one is in Scouts, where as a patrol, you plan your food, you plan who cooks it and who's going to clean up from it. And it's more meticulously planned out instead of just being like, well, if you forgot your food, then beg. I don't know. I don't think it's ever gotten that bad, but
I see what you're saying.
yeah, my club's trips are spring break trips that are usually about a week long. You have to take care of your own food for the entire week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Next time, we'll be talking to how to work with those people you found on the trail, and we'll include both conflict resolution and standard trail etiquette. For now, get off your butt, get outside, and enjoy your adventure.